It is the Anfield Wrap after Liverpool go 5 points clear. Neil Atkinson hosting Mo Stewart, Ian Ryan and John Gibbons. We're not quite as all business as Liverpool Football Club are at the minute, but we're quite business this week. A lot of focus on the league table and where we're up to. But we are in association with the wonderful people at Peloton. Peloton is the official digital fitness partner of Liverpool Football Club. And right now you can check out 6 LFC-themed classes. And one, John, has got Trent Alexander-Arnold in. Last week on Monday, when taking the recycling bin out in ours, I fell off our front step and twisted my ankle. Trent Alexander-Arnold's not doing that. So you should very much go with the LFC theme stuff and Trent Alexander-Arnold and not me. So I've not been on this week, and I believe Leanne's been asking, but I've not been able to get on the Peloton stuff since then after such a colossal error. So my ankle's like the size of a balloon. It wasn't helped by all the goings on Saturday. I was pretty much getting over it, and then Saturday happened. And yeah, from there though, I'm optimistic I'll be back on this week, but we're very much enjoying everything to do with Peloton, all the different classes, very much enjoyed the instructor-led stuff. It really, really helps. Those LFC-themed ones as well.
Well, I'm going to get stuck in today. I've obviously been away for 2 weeks.
Trying to get ahead of me.
I've been over in Florida. so it arrived and I set up my profile and then immediately went on holiday, which has generally been my attitude to fitness. But no, I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in, and it's been really nice. Loads of subscribers getting in touch saying that they've got bikes, so we're going to set up little sort of communities and stuff like that, and share tips and things like that. And yeah, looking forward to getting stuck in today. So big day of shows, and then come 5 o'clock, I'll be on there.
On there, absolutely. Having the time of your life. Go on.
Should I find my own, Leanne?
Yeah. I think you should find your own instructor. Don't you take mine?
Well, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Very much. Quite emphatically, actually, John. I want to be clear.
Okay. I'll see what's about.
See what's about. You see what else is going on. There is scenic content, game-inspired options, and you can stream films and TV shows through there as well. Peloton is the official digital fitness partner of Liverpool Football Club, and we're made up. They're working with us all the way through. So there's more and more on that to come, including us finally getting to the point after John's had a few more goes, me had a few more goes. We'll see if we can time it. So we'll do 2 classes back to back where you can jump on with us. We'll see if we can get a hashtag together. Anyway, I am joined by Mo Stewart, by Ian Ryan, and by John Gibbons. And Ian Ryan, the first thing to take, coming up by the way, is Miguel Delaney on his excellent book State to Play. If you're looking for something else to look forward to, not just Liverpool being top of the pile. Ian, it was a 2-0 in this set-piece era, which in a number of ways has just sort of irritated me a little bit. I do not want to know the name of anyone's set-piece coach. It's perhaps my most anti-modern football thing. I do not want the camera to cut to that little bearded lad on the sidelines who stood next to Arteta. In this set-piece era, it is though fascinating that Villa not taking the chances from their corners and us taking chances from their corners in this game is actually what turned out to be decisive, although my view is that Liverpool had the game in the palm of the hand regardless.
Yeah, in terms of those set-piece guys, there's far too many getting far too much airtime, isn't it? I mean, the manager was asked about set-piece stuff, and he said, well, I don't really get involved in too much of that. I'm aware of it, but there's other people whose job it is to really kind of hone in on that. But he also mentioned that Liverpool, even under the previous manager, had success at doing that and hitting on the break and getting results. And obviously the number of, fairly fast-paced attackers we've got certainly lends itself to being able to do that to teams. But I think you're right. In terms of the game itself, Neil, I always felt like Liverpool had the upper hand. And I think you've got to remember Villa are coming into this on the back of what they would see as 4 poor results. They had 1-4. They go out to Palace in the League Cup. They have a draw against Bournemouth, which can happen. But the defeat to Bruges, they wouldn't have seen coming, and the capitulation to Spurs just felt totally out the blue.
You can get beat to Tottenham. I mean, Ipswich have shown that they don't have to. You can get beat to Tottenham, but to go 1-0 up at half-time after to finish 4-1 is, I think, pretty heavy going. Yeah,
it got a little bit out of control, and I think the manager, someone like Emery, he won't have wanted to see any kind of repeat of that. And I think that maybe just plays into Villa's approach a little bit. They are a bit more tentative than maybe if you'd caught them, 4 or 5 weeks ago. I think they might have had a little bit more of a go. And as we've seen with other games this season, Liverpool aren't really prepared to push the luck too much. It's about picking the moments and picking the times now, which again, you'd have to say they do really, really well, and they come out deservedly 2-0 winners.
Dan Morgan said to me after the game, and said in general after the game, they got what they came for. And what he meant by that was they were happy with be 1-0 down on 70, see what happens, bring the lad off the bench who's got a good record and go from there. And they do sort of get what they came for. I think one of the things that does them in, Mo, that's a little bit of what we came for as well.
Well, I mean, I think it's a bold move to say that we're going to try and win the game against Liverpool late in the day, because that's exactly what Liverpool have been doing for pretty much the last month. If you think about it, the last 20 to 25 minutes, we have been the dominant side. And the current way that we're playing football allows us to be able to be fresher and fitter in those last 25 minutes. And yes, Villa have got lots of depth. They've got good players who can come off the bench and cause problems. But the shot that Morgan Rogers has, like 20 seconds into the first half, they only have one more shot
in the second half.
Yeah, so in the second half. They only have one more shot before it gets to 2-0.
Yeah.
So they don't have a shot for like 35 minutes in that game. And I don't know, if your plan is to win the game late, you kind of need to shoot. So there's a world in which what they were trying to do clearly wasn't working. But as Ian alluded to, the fact that they're in a bad moment at the moment, it's almost like it's harder to then try to find a fix, because they're at a low ebb in confidence. And you looked at the team that they put out there, and you would have assumed having Leon Bailey up against Andrew Robertson, who in recent weeks has struggled against players like Leon Bailey, you would have thought that their plan would have been, okay, let's try and get him the ball. Let's go and get Robertson turning and running towards his own goal, causing problems that way. I don't think they did it once in the whole game.
Yep.
So you get to a situation where their plans, whatever they were, aren't working. Ours are working perfectly. On set pieces, by the way, I came this close to asking the manager about set pieces before in the press conference, and I went with my other question, and I instantly regretted it, because his whole method around them is very interesting to me. He almost sees them as like, oh, well, they don't matter. So whenever we've spoken about chances created, he's always been like, oh, well, that was just a set piece. It's almost like you can't really account for those. But against Arsenal, they didn't have a corner until the 87th minute. So it was like they were clearly trying to stop them having them. Whereas against Villa, they basically did the opposite. They said, you can have them. We're just going to make more of them than you did.
There is in amongst all of that, John, first and foremost, I think there's good news in there. I think there's good news that sides aren't now sort of coming and doing a bit of... Good sides aren't coming and doing a bit of, we'll just try and see if we can blitzkrieg these early and come out the other side. Like, I almost want the idea that people are coming to Anfield and thinking, how do we minimise the damage by the time we get to 75? I think that puts us in a good place. I think the other thing as well is the control point. The game just felt like it was our game all the way through. And that... the numbers don't really necessarily show that. The underlying numbers, not so much the scoreline. All the bits and pieces don't necessarily show that. But being in the ground, at no point did I think we're losing this. And I spent most of the game thinking we're winning this quite comfortably.
Yeah, I think so. And I felt like that as well. But I think in terms of Villa and their approach, what you do need to remember is in terms of top six against each other last year, they were top. They had the best record, better than anyone. I think, I think it's 18 points. I think it is. 5 wins. Just they didn't beat us, but they beat everyone else. They beat Arsenal home and away last season. Now that's hard to replicate. So whenever the team sort of does that, I always think, well, that's a couple of points you're going to lose next season, because that's a hard thing to go and do again. But what it does show, I think, is tactically that they've done pretty well, against other sort of top sides. So I think he came with a sort of similar plan than what they will have done against Arsenal last season.
I agree.
It's just the game sort of goes in a different way. Now you hear him after the game and he's talking about, well, we could have had this penalty and that penalty and sort of stuff like that. And there's always a little bit of that from managers, isn't he? And maybe if you spoke to him, away from canvas and he was a bit more honest, he'd say, oh, listen, we were just sort of second best today. And that's how I feel, the game was. But, if we hadn't have been so controlled, if we or given so much control into the game, or we hadn't scored at sort of key moments, then it could have been a different one. So I don't think Villa necessarily got a lot wrong, and I think the game probably went sort of how they wanted it to in terms of what they were doing. I think this Liverpool side are just so hard to create chances against at the moment, and so hard to create decent chances against, that it's just making it more difficult for the opposition. So they're trying to hang in games, but then when they want to go, like Mo says, it's all well and good saying, right, well, let's create a chance now, but you're not able to sort of go into that moment, because Liverpool are just like, now we're just going to keep the ball, or we'll pen you in, or if you can get some period of opposition, then our centre-halves are playing out the skins. And so it's... I guess what I'm saying is, you can come with a plan, and I don't think their plan's necessarily changed. I just think that the circumstances of what another team will allow them to do. It felt like last season, if a team wanted a big 10 minutes against us, they could have one. Do you know what I mean? They couldn't necessarily have a big half or a big 60 because they'd run out of steam, but they could go, right, this is what we're going to do to this, but they can't at the moment.
What I thought, John, watching live in the ground was these are having to work so hard to get 25 yards from our goal.
Yeah.
They're having to play really well, and everyone's putting a lot in to get 25 yards from our goal. And I think that's the difference between last season at its most vulnerable and this, is that last season you felt as though sides could for 10 minutes just get 25 yards from our goal and start there. You feel like you've already climbed 2/3 of Everest by the time you get to 25 yards from our goal, if you've got the ball and you to get yourself set and be able to do the next thing. And to me, I think that's a marked difference, and I think that's also... I think that also bodes really, really well, because it's one of the reasons why, if you're knackered when you're 25 yards out, you're going to struggle to do the last bit.
One of my favourite things to see at Anfield is a good striker having a shit time. And we saw that, Ollie Watkins was getting frustrated because he's not getting a kick, and that's the best thing to do. Watkins has done pretty well against us in the past, and he's the kind of striker who causes us problems, but the best way to nullify them is just don't let them have the ball, or make them go and search the ball. All right, if you want the ball, then you've got to drop right into your half and knock some stuff off, and that's sound, because where we don't want you is running off the back of it, and exploiting our high line and stuff like that. Like, he had a rubbish night, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Watkins, because he barely gets a kick, and then you can see him, and he's remonstrating with his teammates and the referee and stuff like that. And I'm looking at him thinking, this is brilliant, because this is just a forward who's just getting scraps, absolute scraps, and that's brilliant. And that's what I mean about what you're saying there, Neil, as well. If you can't get the platform, or you can't allow your good players to exploit maybe issues that we have, that all teams sort of have the space somewhere, against any team, but you're not allowing the opposition the time to make the passes or the platforms to get the good players to play. It's just, we're a tough team to play against at the moment.
I think that point about some of their better players just being completely nullified. Like, every time I've turned the TV on this year and Villa are playing, there's just lads bouncing off Morgan Rogers all over the place. He's just marauding through, and he can't stop him. That just didn't happen. And also, in terms of Ollie Watkins, when he's at his best, you always think he's a centre forward who can literally occupy the whole back four. He can occupy all of them. He struggled to occupy one of them the other night because Liverpool just weren't giving him the options. And I think when you looked at that Villa team on paper, it's physical, and you're thinking, Christ, we're going to have to be kind of really at this. And I wasn't sure what the manager might do with his lineup. I thought he might have been tempted to maybe rest McAllister for this one and just go with a bit more size in Jones, Szoboszlai and Gravenberch, but he chooses not to do that. And I don't think McAllister has a particularly great game, and if I'm being honest, I probably would have subbed him before I subbed Jones, but maybe there was a tiredness in there for Jones, who knows. But when you looked at that Villa team, you're thinking, so much physical threat, because Watkins is physical. Onana is just unbelievable in terms of his size. When you see him live, you think, fucking hell. Yeah. I knew he was big, but Christ, he's massive. Yeah. And obviously we touched on Morgan Rogers. So
McGinn comes on. He's the widest
he can handle himself. Yeah, biggest arse you've ever seen. He knows how to put it about and stuff, and he can be physical. But obviously they don't play McGinn because they think that Bailey can get at Robertson. They've clearly watched Robertson this season. He's not been at his best. I think, the pace of Bailey might cause him a problem. But it's probably Robbo's best performance in a long while, to be fair. I'm not saying he was unbelievable, but he was far better than what we've seen in previous weeks.
He was, yeah. If he gone into the game thinking, I'm going to have a tough game there, he really rose to the challenge. And I think that is something that we've seen from him in the past. When he's been under threat, genuinely, when there's been conversations about his form, he's always kind of rose to the occasion, and this was another one. But yeah, I noticed the physical element as well. I think we've seen, Brighton was the perfect example in the first half. One of the big things that weren't wrong was that we were losing every 50-50 and they were getting the ball and everyone was getting a bit frustrated with them. There was none of that on Saturday. Liverpool had clearly got the message that this is how you beat this Villa team. You dominate them physically. You don't let them get a head of steam going. And that's exactly what we did. We're probably going to go on to talk about Ibu, but there's just something about the ease with which he's able to just completely shut down other players, which must be so annoying to play against, because everybody knows about Virgil. And So for years and years, it was like, well, okay, well, we'll just target the other guy. We won't even bother about Virgil. But when the other guy is even better and he's doing it even easier, it's just like, well, where do we go? And you got that sense from Villa. There was times where they were just almost running out of ideas about how we are going to attack this team. And then once, obviously, you take away their main armoury of set pieces, and it's like, well, they're getting more chances from our set pieces than we are. So suddenly, it's just like the frustration ramps up again. And yeah, Liverpool, even in that period in the second half where there was a 1-goal lead, and traditionally you'd think, okay, well, this is still a bit of peril involved in here. There really wasn't.
Konaté, Mo, there's so many facets to what he's doing. It isn't just one thing, so you can end up saying, it's massively about his strength or something else. There's this little thing he does, though. It's this combination of all the above. Firstly, at the minute, to me, looks like the best he's been at. First and foremost, I think the way we're set up at the minute means that, by the time players get to him at times, they've already had to do something quite good to get as far as him. So let's be quite clear about this, or for it to have got there. Then the thing I think he's doing is because often, I think there's a little thing where at times whoever's playing right back, because Bradley did it a little bit as well, what you want to try and push it past me and go into that space, that's absolutely fine, but he's just going to come and eat this.
Yeah.
And so it looks like Bradley's come off second best. It was happening with Trent's come off second best. But actually, it's a little bit like, well, this is the plan. But then there's that combination of tremendous anticipation, the fact that he's probably faster than you. Even if he might not be, as soon as he gets in front of you, he's so big, you're not going to then get round him and you're not going to outmuscle him.
No.
So it's this combination of all of these things where when his body just goes in front, well, that's the end of the matter. I'd love to see the player for whom it is the end of the matter. I think you're looking at like Michael Owen at the age of 17 is the only footballer that where or maybe Ronaldo, original Ronaldo, at his absolute pomp, where that wouldn't just be the end of the matter at that stage.
I mean, you could get someone who maybe could just run in between his legs. I don't know. But yeah, it's like you say, it's a combination of all those things. But I also think it's the confidence, because there was times previously where it would look like he wanted to do things, but he couldn't get there. So there's that moment in the second half where he blocks the ball and then it kind of runs away from him, and then it's almost like equidistant between him and the Villa player, but he's like, no, I'm getting this, and he just runs over there and just slides in and nicks it. And you'd have thought previously that was about a 50-50 chance that he was going to get it, but everyone on the pitch knew he was going to get it, even the Villa guy running towards the balls. And that level of confidence of like, no, I've got this, I'm in complete control of everything I want to do. And that is, I think, helped to elevate him to another level. I do also think that he's got basically a coach standing next to him in terms of, and not telling him what to do, but just in terms of reinforcing all the positive messaging in Virgil. I do think that when you hear Virgil talk about Ibu, it very much feels like he's like an older brother saying, okay, my guy's ready now, but he still needs work, but I'm going to make sure that by the time I'm leaving this place, he's as good as I've been. And I think that can only be really positive for all of us.
His performances at the moment are phenomenal, aren't they? And it feels like it's become sort of very instinctive, and that's the confidence that Mo was talking about there. He's not sort of overthinking, his game. He's because the confidence is there. It's all sort of very natural, and he's got this wonderful combination of obviously the physical attributes he's got, the size and his pace, but also the intelligence as well that he's got in terms of his positioning, which is very rare, really, to have the two sort of working together, and that is why he looks like he's making it so easy at the moment, because it is so hard to sort of get past him or sort of get the better of him, because his recovery pace is excellent, but he very rarely needs it because his positioning is so strong. Like you said, Neil, he's covering for others as well. He seems to have an awareness of where the ball's going to come, which is, again, quite rare for someone who's still quite young for a centre-half, really. So the first yard's at his head, and the second and third yard, he's quicker than you. And so you're like, well, and he's massive. And then you're like, well, so what? That's why if people are sort of finding it so hard, really. And, it's a phenomenal run of games from him now. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. I thought that might be his best you know, he's played on Sunday, but it's Saturday, sorry, but it's a very high bar. You know, we're doing the ratings later, and I was looking at the ones that you've done in the past games, and it's Konaté and do you know what I mean? And so, like, it's this run of really impressive performances, and like, again, like Mo said before, you know, I think he's maybe a little bit more impressive than Virgil at the moment, because people are used to having to sort of play on the other guy. But soon, I don't know, they're going to have to think of something else, because he's just coping with everything brilliantly well. And, you know, he's a big part of why we're playing so well at the moment, and it's brilliant to see.
Yeah, I said something on Twitter kind of after the game, you know, if there's another centre-half kind of in Europe playing better than him, then I've not seen him. And that doesn't mean I think he's better than Van Dijk overall, but in this moment, over the last kind of 4 to 6 weeks, I just think he's been absolutely superb from start to finish. There's that little tiny wobble against Wolves for maybe 10 minutes where he just looks a little bit shaky, but he kind of sorts himself out, and he makes an unbelievable tackle in that game that you think's probably going to end up in a certain goal. But yeah, he's been brilliant. I think maybe you've got to give credit to maybe what's going on in the background as well, because they get him on the pitch more often than not, and I don't think he's ever played this many games in a row. Maybe the manager deserves credit as well, because there's been times where I've thought, maybe just rest him for this one. You know, Leverkusen being a prime example. You're thinking, Joe Gomez on the back of a great performance. Joe can go again, no problem with that. But he plays the big man, and he's not let him down once. And I think one of the things you can never measure, I suppose, is the influence that a Van Dijk will have on others. You'll never be able to know what playing next to him feels like. And you just think, well, you get all the security in the world from playing next to Van Dijk. He leads, and I think you've seen that more as he's become the captain. You can tell he's a real voice on the pitch. But Konaté's form, I mean, if it continues, you hope he gets the plaudits, because it didn't take long for the mainstream media to jump on those other two at Arsenal when he would have half-decent games. But forget that the protection they had in front of them more often than not. Last year, Liverpool never had anything like that. And yet now it's slightly different in terms of what the manager's doing, and it's a bit more secure what's going on in front of them. But make no mistake about it, them two as a partnership, there's very few that are touching their level at the minute.
I think you're both right to credit Virgil, because I think I have said it before on the show, but I think it's worth sort of repeating again now that we get more evidence that whoever he plays with, he seems to make them better. And I think that's says a lot, really, because when we talk about centre-half partnerships, it's often about, you know, the combination of skills that make them good. So, you know, when we were, you know, in our sort of late teens, we're all about the same age. You know, we were watching Hyypiä and Honcho, and they were a combination.
I'll take that, to be fair, John.
He worked well with each other, because, you know, Hyypiä was one side with the defender, Honcho was another. You know, our dads used to talk about Lawrence and Hansen having a similar sort of thing, and it was centre-half partnerships where the combination of skills and the understanding that they got together, you know, worked really well. Whereas from a Liverpool point of view, from now, you know, whoever Virgil plays with, you know, he can strike up these relationships with them, and I think that's because of his leadership and his intelligence. But I also think he just makes them feel great. Do you know what I mean? He's like the ultimate hype man, you know, in terms of like whoever he's playing with, he's talking them up, he's saying how good they are, but you can tell probably privately as well, he's talking to them about, you know, what they need to work on and stuff like that. And it's a massive thing if you can do that as any footballer on any part of the pitch. If you can not just perform at a really high standard yourself, but also get great performances out of the person who's your mate alongside you, whether that be in midfield or forward or whatever, you know, is exceptional. And I think he's a big part of why Konaté's playing so well, just like I think he's a big part of why Quansah started his career so well at Liverpool, why Joe Gomez, you know, has been so impressive in the past, and Matip as well. You know, before Virgil come, I don't think any of us were talking about Matip as being this, like, there was question marks over him, you know, said on this show, people saying he's not quite good enough and stuff like that. And so, you know, he's doing that, and it's not like he's doing all the work, because like we said, everyone runs away from him, and so it's not like he's like, oh, I'll just take everything, you can have an easy life. They haven't got an easy life. They're just playing at a higher level because he's there.
As partnerships go, though, to John's point, often there's a dovetailing. So the Hyypiä Honcho, you can just in your mind's eye, you can see the dovetailing. I think that, for instance, possibly the best or one of the best Premier League partnerships ever is Vidic and Ferdinand, and you can see the dovetailing of that. What I think is really interesting about Van Dijk and Konaté is the partnership they actually remind me the most of is Campbell and Toure. who were Arsenal's partnership for the season that they go unbeaten. And Campbell and Toure were both capable of doing everything. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying at the minute, Mo, with the possible exception of, and I want to be really clear here, Virgil's inch-perfect 70-yard balls. It feels like...
And one person can take care of them.
Well, yeah. They don't all need to be absolute. But by the way, Konaté's passing, the level of his passing has improved markedly. And his passing into midfield's brilliant. And he started to do the occasional switch. But it is this feeling, isn't it, that the 9 or 10 out of 10, both of them are absolutely everything. It isn't quite a dovetailing in that old style way.
No, and because in the old style way, what you would do is that the one who has got the physical threats, you would kind of play off onto the other one. So you'd try to find the weak point of one of them and try and play against that. But to your point, there is no weak point. Like Bournemouth, classic example, Bournemouth came to Anfield and their plan was clearly, we're going to make sure Konaté has to do all the passing. They blocked off everybody else and allowed Kelleher to pass to him and said, okay, you beat us. And what happened? He beat them. He played key passes to start all three Liverpool goals in that game. And from that moment on, I feel like teams have now kind of understood the fact that, yes, we can't do that now. He has no weaknesses. They have no weaknesses. We have to try other things. And the other thing I think about as well, the spaces in behind Trent was another thing that we saw lots and lots of teams come and try to exploit. And to be honest, I felt like to a certain extent asking Konaté to cover that as well was part of why his fitness wasn't quite to where it wanted to be. We aren't asking him to do that as much.
Yep.
So I do think that we have to give Trent a lot of credit. I think Trent's defensive numbers are higher than they've ever been as well. So we're actually making his job a little bit easier there. And the defence is more of a unit. It's not like Virgil up front and everyone else funding behind it. It's a unit of all four of them. And a team's coming to us and, like, I would love to be in the meetings to work out what they're saying. When they're like, how are we going to attack these? Because I got no idea.
The situation where last year, well, in 21-22 especially, those two centre-backs looked as though they could patrol about the biggest set amount of space you've ever given centre-backs to patrol and keep clean sheets and do really well doing it. And they're the same players, and now the space being asked to control is just less significant. And, of course, they're going to excel. Conceded 6 and 11 in the league, 1 in 4 in Europe so far over the course of the campaign, without the same goalkeeper behind them all the way through. Also, they've had their second hardest game away of the season in that period as well, away from home. Tougher away challenges to come, but worth pointing that one out. We'll do some more individual performances. I was going to do the maths, but we can all hang on for the maths. It's something to look forward to. Saying they haven't had the first choice goalkeeper behind them, Ian, it's another good performance for Kelleher. It's what he's just shown at the minute is, I think his level is that of, without any shadow of a doubt, more than good enough to be a goalkeeper for a side that wants to play Champions League football. And I think that is hugely to his credit. And you're seeing it sort of game in, game out. I just think he's coming across so impressive. And we know the other goalkeeper's been bought. We know Alisson Becker. We also know about his fitness record, but we've also got to see the quality of Jaros. I think my overall point here is that I feel in a really mature way, at least I hope so, as a fan base. I just feel there's this thing here where we're getting to see a player show he's going to do a really good job for a really good club next season. You might think otherwise, but I actually like that. I like the idea that Kelleher's going to be able to look back at his time at Liverpool and think, you know what, this was the making of me.
He's been brilliant. He's been absolutely brilliant. And I think what you've seen, I think we probably already knew it, but what we've seen recently, it just makes a mockery of that Nottingham Forest bid that came in, where they were just trying to take.
To be fair, they've ended up with the goalkeeper themselves.
Yeah. Listen, let them crack on. But they were obviously, they were trying it on a little bit, trying to get him that close to the deadline, and we've reaped the rewards because it's clear he wanted to go because he felt he wouldn't get the opportunities. But because you are back up to Alisson, and we know how good he is, but because you are back up to that goalkeeper, you are always going to get chances to play because we know his fitness record is not what we'd like it to be or what he'd like it to be as well, more importantly. But again, the game against Villa, real kind of, really highlights just how good he is. He has that one little moment where maybe it's the adrenaline on the back of 2 good saves where he comes out and it just goes over him. But apart from that, he was pretty faultless again. And I think you've seen that since he's been in the Liverpool team. Yes, there are maybe 1 or 2 where you think, could he have done slightly better with that? But But I was chatting to Andy before the game on against Villa. We were talking a little bit about Martinez. All goalkeepers will make mistakes.
Yep.
If you're going to judge them on that, yes, of course, the very best ones make the fewest. But if you're going to look at a goalkeeper and go, he's made a mistake, he's shite, well then you're going to run out of goalkeepers because they all do it. Even the very best of them.
Yeah.
Even Alisson, as good as he is, he still makes mistakes. And that's just, people will often talk about Schmeichel, who was unbelievable as a goalkeeper. But when you watch some of those kind of
loves getting chipped,
the sky years, there are times where he's at fault for goals, but you just forget about it because all you remember are the great saves and the fact that everyone talks him up so much. Rightly so, by the way, he was unbelievable. But it's like this thing that no great goalkeepers make mistakes. They all do, but the best ones make the fewest. And I think Kelleher is demonstrated through recent times that he's a goalkeeper that doesn't make that many. One or two things might go through him now and again. That can happen. Because, he's not the level of Alisson. But overall, his performances, I think, have far exceeded what we thought. And you're just thankful that he's still around. Because, I take your point on Yaros Neil, but I've not seen anywhere near enough of him to know what kind of true level he's at. But you're going into games now, the biggest compliment you can kind of pay Kelleher is you're not fazed that he's playing. No one's fazed. No one ever says, fucking hell, Kelleher's... But you just don't hear that conversation. It never happens because everyone, broadly speaking, is really comfortable with where he's at in terms of his level.
I think he was the best goalkeeper on the pitch. We should probably say that. And despite the fact that the other fella has got a few awards that tell him that he's the best, he wasn't the best.
Represented by Sachi and Sachi, that prick. Honestly.
But
the money you spend on PR.
Oh, goodness me. But no, the reality is we mentioned Alisson, and he's starting to remind me of Alisson in the way that we won't hear anything about him all game, and then he'll make a save that's just like, wow. But he'll make it look easy. Like, I think of this game, I think of Leverkusen, I think of Brighton. There were all chances where if he hadn't made those saves and the goal had gone in, the whole game changes, the whole complexion of the game. Obviously, the one against Russo against Brighton, when we were already 1-0 down, 2-0 down, it's a very different game. It's a very different week.
Yeah.
Leverkusen, obviously, they're at the point where they're already 2-0 down, but if they get one, then they'll have the belief that they can make it a really tough last 10. For Villa, obviously, we've already talked about how important set pieces are to their game plan. That's the whole thing. That was their whole way home because they didn't have anything else. So all of those points could have gone completely different. But looking back in hindsight, we aren't really talking about them. Because it's just, Liverpool won that game and Liverpool did well, and we talk about the forwards, we talk about Salah, what have you. We needed him in all three of those games, and he was there. And the thing about it is that he comes out when we need him, makes a save, then he fades back into the background. That's exactly what you want from a goalkeeper.
Yeah, I think this run of performances of his best since... he broke through at Liverpool, and it's a number of years now. Obviously, he came to prominence really during the season where he was playing in cup finals and stuff like that, and he did well in those periods, and he's got the medals to show for it. But you're always sort of a little bit worried about him, and a little bit concerned. And then last season, he actually, at the start of the season, finds it really tough. He's coming in for the Europa League games. He's not playing well. I remember him getting a lot of criticism in those. And then when Alisson gets injured and he gets a proper run, as he's playing more consistently. He started playing a lot better. But this one now, this sort of bank is phenomenal. And I think, what you're seeing now from his point of view is he's demonstrating, to everyone really, if there was any doubts about him, and there must have been, because like you say, the bids aren't coming in the summer, so everyone must have sort of looked at him and thought, he's a decent number 2 maybe, but is he sort of what we want? I think his personality and his way can sort of count against him a little bit sometimes, because he is so he looks like he's just gone for a walk and found himself in goal for Liverpool, doesn't he? Do you know what I mean? He's like, someone's, it's like, I used to have a book when I was a kid about, a kid turning up and ended up playing for a made-up team or whatever, Stanley Biggins or something, or Baggins it was called. It's coming back to me now, but, ends up saving a penalty in a cup game. He looks a little bit like that, but I think that, but don't be fooled, because I think, you know, if you're in your opposition against him, then he'll make you look foolish, because I think at the moment that the level of consistency.
I think what helps is there's no man of the match performances, and what I mean by that is he's being a goalkeeper for a really grown up team.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So it's not as though he's being thrown in, it's all backs against the wall and he's saving stuff and all that. Do you know what I mean? He's just being a goalkeeper for a really, really good team, and he just looks like he fits being a goalkeeper for a really good team.
Yeah, and I think that's probably right, and people who are probably getting more attention, like, you know, you talk about Martinez there. People were raving about him. Yeah, no, he is a good keeper, but people were raving about him recently against Bayern Munich and how well he played and that. But that's because Bayern Munich had loads of shots. Do you know what I mean? I always think goalies are a bit like performance seals. Sometimes you throw a ball up and they'll jump up and look great. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if they don't get the opportunities to do that, then but they could all do it. They could all do the high wire sort of diving up stuff. You know, it's how they.
I'm enjoying you damming them all with faint praise here.
Oh, I mean, they're not real footballers, Neil. So you know, but I think no, but it's the other stuff I think that makes the sort of the top keepers. But that's when you're just watching Match of the Day or the highlights or, you know, whatever it is, the highlights from Champions League or whatever, you're seeing sort of the big save and the eye catching stuff, and I think we can all get sort of sucked in by that. But he's really good at the stuff that I think does separate the top goalkeepers. And at the moment, you're talking about, you know, what happens next and things like that. From a cynical Liverpool point of view, what you know, the bet. If the only benefit to us is that he doubles in value from what we were sort of getting, then that is something, you know what I mean? Because all the money is reinvested and things like that. So I'm made up for him. I think it's what we're seeing now is probably setting him up for the next thing rather than necessarily setting up to be sort of Liverpool's number one moving forward. But if everyone benefits, then brilliant.
First of all, John, because I got that book. Sounds great. Might a little go at that. I think what you just said there, Gibbo, in terms of he can look at himself in the mirror and go, I've played a huge part in getting trophies over the line.
Stanley Bagshaw, it was, not brilliant. Stanley Bagshaw, look into it. Sorry, mate.
But he can say, I've played a huge part in getting trophies over the line for this club. So in terms of the journey he's been on, you can imagine now how he kind of feels about himself. You talked about some of those Europa League performances. They're the ones I was alluding to, and I was saying one or two things might have been going through him and you're starting to question. But you've not really seen that for a while. Listen, it could happen to a keeper, as I said before, but where he is now, you're just massively grateful he's still around.
Good performance from Robertson. I felt like it was needed. What I very much liked was there was no backward steps. I thought it was a little bit more classic Robertson, presumably on the manager's instruction. One of the best ways to, again, the same thing applies. By the time Leon Bailey gets 20 yards from our goal, he's knackered because he's had to work really hard to go 60 yards. And I think that Liverpool pushed Robertson up, and I thought they saw the benefits of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think he starts the game well, which I think helps because he'd have been too aware.
Started too very well, yeah.
Only too aware that, you know, Villa have made a conscious decision to play a lad who they can get joy because they've seen his performances. He may be a bit expecting to play against Mick, and he knows him really well, obviously from the national team. But he starts really well, and he doesn't really look back. I thought he was pretty good. You'd certainly say maybe 7 out of 10, which he's been a long way back from that recently. I think he's been maybe second guessing himself a little bit, where that's where you see him just dropping a slightly deeper than the line, and he's obviously thinking, fucking hell, I'm up against pacey wingers here, the likes of Madueke, the likes of Saka, where I've got to maybe give myself a little bit more of a yard. He's not trusting the kind of process and kind of being in line with the others. And you know, you've seen that kind of play out in his performances where he's just looked 2 or 3 notches below his best. And listen, people have written him off and have written him off maybe they've gone a little bit early. It's hard to know. Yeah, I'd like to see more of those performances against Villa before we're really kind of sure where this level is, because there's no doubt the manager likes Tsimikas as well, and I think, you know, we've all probably had different views on Tsimikas during this time, but he's an example now where he is getting rhythm and he is looking better than probably what a lot of people thought his level was, and I think it's important to say that he is playing a massive part as well. And I thought maybe Robertson might have come in for the European game the other night, but the manager decided to stick with Tsimikas, and he's got most of the European games this season, hasn't he? He's kind of backed him to kind of, you know, to be his number one left back in that competition. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But yeah, personally speaking, I was made up for Robbo.
I think that there's a really clever thing going on here at the moment where, the manager's able to use both of them together and get the best out of both of them. Because I think one of the things about Robertson's game isn't so much about his pace, it's about his stamina. The fact that he can just keep running and keep running and keep running. And just like Neil says, he just wears out whoever's up against him. So they get to the end of the game and they've run like 12K and they haven't really got anywhere. Whereas he's able to be effective at both ends of the pitch. And he was really good in their box against Villa. I thought a couple of times he put some really good balls in, really dangerous balls. But he's probably benefited from the fact that he hasn't had to play 3 games of the week. That he's been able to say, okay, I've got this one game that I can really empty the tank for. And maybe that's what we need to see from here going forward, because he is always going to be playing full minutes for Scotland. He is still their captain. He wants to be there. The manager's under pressure. He wants to be able to give him everything he can. But now that we have got 2 guys who can really do the job, maybe we can get the best out of him by not ragging him. And that means that Tsimikas gets to keep his rhythm up. So it's not a case of him having to come in once every 3 months and then he's a bit unsure of himself. So we see the best of Tsimikas from him playing more. We see the best of Robertson from him playing a little bit less. And then we've got 2 very good left backs.
Yeah, I think, we talked before about the centre-halves having a slightly easier job. I think that's probably the case for the fullbacks as well. He's not just simplifying things for one position on the pitch. It's sort of, all of them really, and maybe that's helping, Costas a little bit, and maybe that's why we're seeing better performances from him. I think that. I think the manager thinks they're all good footballers as well, and I think he's told us that from the start, and maybe we should believe him because we're top of the league, we're top of all the leagues, and so maybe he was right, and maybe when people are like, oh yeah, he definitely wants 4 signings, and he's like, well, maybe I'd like 1 or 2, but these lads are really good, and I think that's a case for different parts of the pitch. I don't think he's going, oh fucking hell, I'm getting 11 here. I think it's more like whom we're sort of leaving out really, and that's not just the case at left back. I think there's quite a few positions, centre half. I think he's shown he'll sort of play others, from forward positions as well. I don't think he cares too much if Gakpo plays left forward or Diaz does. You know what I mean? He's just picking them based on the opposition and freshness and maybe who he feels has got the most energy sort of going into the game. And so I think he feels that across the pitch, he's got sort of really good options, and as fans there's ones we like more than others, and listen, we've been watching them for longer, so maybe we'll say, oh, there's this game, or whatever, you'll always sort of have your favourites, and he'll have his favourites, he'll have ones who he thinks, oh yeah, they're vital for me moving forward, and others that maybe sort of less bothered about, but I think he thinks they're all really good, and I think he's getting a song out of all of them. And on Robertson, I thought he was, you said no backward steps there. He was very front foot. I think one thing he decided is, well, it's better for me if he just doesn't get the ball. The number of times he stepped up and just anticipated, he telegraphed the pass. He could see it was going wide to Bailey, and he's thinking, well, if Bailey gets the ball and then I'm 1-on-1 with him, then I'm going to struggle, because anyone would, because he's good and he's quick. But if I could anticipate that pass, sorry, good job, that was more or less empty. If I could anticipate that pass, I was too front foot there with the glass. If I can anticipate that and I can get ahead and forward, then he can't run at me, because I'm now running at them, and then he was getting it and sort of going, and that was sort of great to see really, because you've got to be confident to do that, but he did it, and like you said before, it works well once, so then you get the confidence to do it again.
Coming up, that was all a bit mad. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to Miguel Delaney in a minute, and then after that, we're going to talk about Nunez and Salah, and we're going to talk about where the season is and what the maths are saying as well. So anyway, Miguel Delaney's got a new book out. It's called States of Play. It's very much worth reading. Here's me talking to Miguel about it. I'm with Miguel Delaney to talk about States of Play, his book, which I think is out now at the time of you listening to this at the very least. It is a remarkably timely piece of work about how football got to this point. What I really liked about it, Miguel, was you didn't just simply pick, say, 2008 for one reason or another. What you had all the way through the book was the idea that this has been a direction of travel that's been going on arguably since the 60s, certainly in England since the early 80s. You mentioned what happens with Tottenham Hotspur being placed on to the stock exchange in the early 80s. The point about so much of the book is that whilst a lot of clubs might not like where the direction of travel has taken them, a lot of very big clubs, Glasgow Rangers get mentioned a couple of times, have wanted this.
Yeah, and that's actually, I would say, almost the moral lesson of the book. Mostly actually from Milan and Rangers in that sense. 2 clubs that very much shaped the future. You could argue the same of Everton, even Liverpool, in terms of kind of creating the Premier League. And the world we've got now, it doesn't feel like it's where football should be.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like those who can actually make a difference, football's authorities, and even beyond that, government institutions, although we obviously have the wider debate now with the regulator, it doesn't feel like there's much thought about where football is going and why and what the game should look like. And so from covering a lot of these topics over a long period of time in Independent, it was kind of something that was eating away at me for a while, thinking there's all of this stuff is kind of linked together.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's something bigger there, which is, I suppose, the genesis of the book. And obviously, on the cover, it says the word sports washing. That, I suppose, is the hook. And I know like a lot of it stems out from the influence of state ownership and what that means to the game. But I suppose immediately when I started to think about how to cover that, you can't talk about state ownership without talking about what the game is. And one of the reasons these states were attracted to buying clubs is the immense social power of football. I mean, I quote Tom Holland in the book, who describes it as probably the most popular cultural pursuit that's ever existed in history.
Yep.
And if you think about that, I mean, and like I opened the book actually with this little image of Messi in Doha with the bisht around him and the Emir Qatar near him hosting up the World Cup. That gives Qatar as a state a positive association with something. They're basically written into sporting history in a way that no black ops, no propaganda, no PR could achieve. And I suppose these are all these forces coming together at once in this to leave the game, I think, in a necessarily good place.
Where you end up is with the book is that you start off with Erwin Scholar mentioned. I've mentioned a minute ago. You've just mentioned Milan there, Berlusconi in there. That individual people, and if we're not frank, whenever we say people in this world, we mean men. Individual men repeatedly try to find a way to hook their own advantage in, and then before you know where you are, you've created a world where Abramovich can happen and can't be scrutinised, or there's not even the framework to consider scrutinising him in the moment. Then we get to the takeover of Manchester City, not scrutinised in the moment. It's a different world by the time we get to the takeover of Newcastle, but even that is not being able to be genuinely scrutinised in the moment, because in so many of these areas, and it still remains the case now, having it be opaque suits so many people who were involved in the business of football.
And there's an amazing line, I think, from Graham Kelly in the book, which he said at the time, and this was about the foundation of the Premier League, where, I mean, it's a bit like the Super League now, and it's incredible to think, had the FA just said no, the Premier League could never have happened. But of course, they didn't say no because they were involved in their own
spat
with the EFL at the time, which is incredible. So Kelly says, we were guilty of a tremendous lack of foresight. And I think that's true of essentially every major moment in football at the moment.
Yeah.
And if you stand back and say, look at something that's very relevant now, the City hearing, the recent APT case, which is at least tangentially connected. Whatever you think about those issues, they are a consequence of football being unable to deal with a power it's let in that it just can't possibly regulate. I mean, if you think about what football is, I mean, because the book kind of has to go to these basic principles. Like, what is a club? Something the FIFA have never articulated.
Yeah.
But a club basically just exists to represent the community in playing games. By extension, sport just exists to put on some matches. So, I mean, for decades, sporting rules never really needed to be anything more than just tight enough to stage games fairly. But of course, once you let in initially finance, capitalists who have greater political ambitions, and then eventually when you get up to autocratic states who wield huge influence and own 7 to 9% of global fossil fuels, how can sport possibly control that? And then you suddenly need, and we're seeing this with the City case, suddenly you need sporting regulation that is as watertight as state law. It's remarkable when you stand back. And moments like that occur to me a lot in the book. I mean, even the kind of realization that the 1994 World Cup directly led to the Super League, or the attempt at the Super League. But a lot of that stands out.
But I think that's why it is, to me, it is, and this is why I think when people try to, in inverted commas, take sides in amongst so much of this, and when people are perceived, people like you, I know especially, have been perceived as wanting to take sides, I think that where we end up is that so much of the seeds of this have been going back so long.
Yeah.
And that to me is, it's the biggest thing I took from the book was that you can very much not like where we are now, but then as part of that, you've got to say, well, did you like what was being decided in 1992? Yeah. What would you change from what was going on in the early 80s? What genuinely do you think that people should be able to extract money out of football clubs? Like, genuinely, what is your philosophical position on that? And the book doesn't shy away from that. It does have sports washing on the front, and you even get to the point of arguing the phrase now is just absolutely inept in terms of what it's meant to describe. Yeah. It's now so far away from the idea of what that is, and that you can even argue that it's a modern phrase, but you can take it right the way back historically. We can talk about the 1978 World Cup and talk about that. This is
that even seems now. Staging tournament seems such a crude version of sports washing now in comparison to what it's become.
Yeah, but it was there. It's 78. There's a line through from 78 to 94 to all of the issues around 2018, 2022 to what then happens behind the scenes in that. To the idea of where the power brokers are. You've got your wonderful cast of characters and timeline out the front that I liked a great deal. The timeline, I like a timeline that starts in 1863. But an extended cast of characters as well that genuinely is, it's 5 pages long of people who are going to end up being cited in the book. Because the one thing that links them all, pretty much all of them, is they will constantly act in self-interest. Yeah. I can pick a random name. I will literally do it now for everyone, Miguel, and we'll be able to think of an instance where the in self-interest. Florentino Perez. Feels like I haven't tried hard enough. Neymar. Neymar's a good example of one where Neymar ends up this hugely consequential transfer where he's so resentful massively off the back of that massive win that Barcelona get, that he's not at the centre of it, that Messi is, and it leads to this hugely consequential thing for Qatar that further ruins. And then in amongst that as well, you've got the idea of Qatar spats spats doesn't seem right, but with their regional rivals, like so much of this is quite petty, and then it ends up having huge global significance and significance for a whole sport.
And even Neymar, I suppose you've pointed to there. So that transfer, which is still the world record, which is amazing, I think, given the money that's come into the game, that still is the case. So that happened August 2017. As you alluded to there, what happens in August 2017? Well, Saudi Arabia, UAE, lead a blockade of Qatar, which is partly connected to the awarding of the 2022 World Cup in 2010, and basic regional jealousy. And so this is obviously a massive security concern for Qatar. At one point, they fear invasion from Saudi Arabia. So what is the best way to keep the world talking about your at that point, little state? Well, disrupt the world transfer market. So football was collateral in this wider tension. And just with Neymar, I've got stories in the book about what he was like, and it's amazing that I think I opened the Paris Saint-Germain chapter, or the main Paris Saint-Germain chapter, talking about how Neymar actually thought Paris Saint-Germain was unprofessional, which is remarkable given perceptions of his career. But in some ways, for all that he's become a caricature himself, I think Neymar is actually a great victim of what football has become.
Absolutely.
So someone whose talent was exploited for other ends, even though he should have agency given his immense ability and his obvious agency on the pitch. It doesn't feel that translated to his career, and you get the sense of someone that was always kind of maneuver down areas that he didn't necessarily want to go into, and then it was a career that went unfulfilled.
One of the things that keeps coming through over and over again, reading the book all the way through when you're telling the whole historical pitch, is precisely the fact that there isn't ever a competing positive vision. There is never. It never feels as though anyone, there's a number of mentions of marketing agencies that are sent out to come up with X or come up with Y, but they never appear to be, and we've got to be really clear here, it doesn't work like this, but I'll just use this as shorthand, on the side of the Angels. That so many of these competing visions, very few of them are putting supporters at the centre of them. And that is, to me, that's desperately sad. I think that's also something that supporters themselves have got to think about. This is something that I keep running into, which is that you can't just keep saying no to things and think that the people who say yes won't eventually win. And especially if they're saying yes with big packets of money knocking around them. To me, this has become football's biggest issue, really, which is so much of the change in the game you can just sort of look at in a face value way and say that's bad, but there's not a lot of people who are proposing anything else that could be good.
Yeah, and the two chapters directly related to what you said there. One is on the place of fans and how to deal with this, and one on the war between FIFA and UEFA, which is a huge part of this. And I kind of mentioned the place of fans. It goes into obviously bigger issues, including how you kind of address ownerships. But it's more so about the sense, for so many clubs, I mean, and this is actually something that really stood out to me when I read Eamon Dunphy's Only a Game, 20 years ago. And when he's at Millwall and he's talking about, you go into a season and there's that feeling, if pre-season's right, if there's a few signings, you actually have a chance of doing something special this season.
Yep.
And this was true for so many clubs. That's actually, unless you're part of a select few, or unless you view football in terms of very narrow parameters, like where a cup run necessarily, or finishing 8th for some clubs, that's something absent from the modern game, and it's amazing. And just from that perspective, so in all of, say, UEFA, and this exactly cuts to what you're talking about in terms of agencies, in all of UEFA's various literature about kind of football and what they want, there's absolutely no mission statement about what they think football should look like. Questions like, which are fundamental to how the sport is played. How many clubs should win a league in a given period? Yep. What is a healthy points return to win the league? What's a good threshold that speaks to competitive balance? And all of these fields are issues that football isn't talking about, because essentially what's happened is, since the 80s, it's opened itself up to just this free market.
And everything's narrowed and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed. So you mentioned the free market in there as well. A lot of this is football as a bit of a corollary for the way in which the world's gone, the direction of travel of the world, or vice versa, for that matter, where that's impacted, therefore, football. This is why, when you say about writing it, you were pulling it together in The Independent. I'd argue that this is, in a number of ways, one of the most essential books I've read, in that I really want you to sell loads of copies, not because I like you, but the reason why is I think that what's in it shouldn't able to be ignored. Like, I would like this to be a number one bestseller off the basis of the fact that then, if you are trying to write a bland analysis piece of something that's going on in football, well, you look a fool. Because it feels to me as though there was a period of time, I would say, arguably up until about, let's say, 2013, where I think the back pages, having the head in the sand, was relatively reasonable. Then I think that begins to dissipate. I found the coverage genuinely of Usmanov, Mashiri, Everton, Arsenal to be mind-boggling in the fact that no one actually went, he sold those shares on Friday and bought those shares on Monday, and no one's asking a question. Just on here, thinking about what happens in this community here. At the time, I thought that was mad. There's obviously court cases that are ongoing that are going to be of huge import. The book is essential, isn't it? Because the book is very much saying, this is the football world that we're all writing about all the time. This is the football world as it is now.
I mean, from that perspective as well, I mean, my day job, essentially, it's still at the core of it. I'm chief football writer at The Independent. My day job is going to games a lot.
Yeah.
And there's that realisation, the more you go to and the more you play out seasons, and they end up largely with the same results. In a way, people go, oh, football has always been like this. As I point out in the book, it's never been like this. There's been never this level of concentration. Even if you want to go to one of the main examples, given that we're speaking on the day of Liverpool Leverkusen, Bayern Munich had never won more than 3 league titles in a row until this run. Teams like as recently as 2007, Stuttgart and Schalke were in a Bundesliga race, and that's all related to this concentration of wealth that we're talking about. And I found, like, the more I wrote, or the more I covered games, the more you're kind of thinking, unless it's the very biggest games, where it does come down to these margins, so much of what happens on the pitch is now actually preset by what happens off it.
What I think is really important in the book is that we'll sum this up in a minute, and we're going to do a longer chat, which is behind the paywall for subscribers. But just on that, what I thought was actually, in a way, really quite hard hitting was the all-time winning streak since 1992, the number of them, and the fact that with the exception of Germany, they don't really involve major leagues in the way in which we perceive them. But you end up in a situation where Ludogorets start getting some Champions League money, and they're exceptionally difficult to beat. Salzburg fall into that category. Rosenborg get on a run. Borisov in Belarus get on a run in there as well. Sheriff in Moldova get on a run. And all the way through, I think one of your wider points is that what happens at the top of football actually has huge, like, genuine throwing the rock into the pond, waves coming out, and it's a massive rock. And the waves are massive for Belarus, for Moldova, for what's happening in Northern Irish football. For, you can go through the list of where the ramifications are. They are, and then League One, League Two, the importance of the rules in order to ensure that those clubs can pay players. As basic as that. That's part of the reason why the rules were put in.
And that's one point worth making as well at this point. I mean, obviously, due to the APT case, all the controversy about Newcastle today, PSR and FFP have become these live issues again. And there are all sorts of conspiracy theories about that. But I spoke to people who formed the rules for the book. That one of the reasons they happened was, there's actually a very workable example you can show. Leeds and Valencia playing the Champions League semi-final in 2001. Within half a decade, both are experiencing major financial difficulties because of the need to stay in this race. But it was the effect of that further down. So because there's an upward drag, which Mark Polias of Tranmere actually speaks about in the book, because of that upward drag of wages, where if wages are paid at one level, everyone has to try and get up in the next, which constantly creates these tank traps. It led to a situation in the early 2000s where suddenly you go to Ireland, you go to Czech Republic, and clubs, A, they can't pay the second instalment of transfer fees, and B, they can't pay their players. And we're talking about players in kind of fairly everyday wages.
Well, you use the reference of people, kids aren't getting Christmas presents.
Yeah. And we always look at it through the prism of the top end, inevitably because of like its global visibility and attraction. But that does shape everything below it and has a real effect.
That's why it's essential. It's top to bottom. You made up with it. Have you got enough distance from finishing it yet to sort of to clear to go? You know what? I did well there, or I didn't do well there, or
it's. How to put that? I'm happy with it. It says what I want to say, and I suppose I hope that it just, as you say, it provokes more discussion.
It should provoke a lot of discussion. It is, quite frankly, it is about the state of play. It is States of Play. It is by Miguel Delaney. The subtitle does say how sports washing took over football, but genuinely, it's about a lot more than that. We'll talk further in a minute or two. See you soon. Great stuff from Miguel. We've got a special coming for subscribers, so if you want to subscribe to the Anfield Wrap of all the brilliant post-match Aston Villa content, but coming up this week as well, I had a 40-minute conversation with Miguel about the book States of Play. I genuinely would recommend it to anyone. I would describe it as downright essential in terms of its wider, full application around everything that's happened in football across the last 30, 40 years. He does not pull his punches all the way through, and he ends up with a really strong thesis. It's definitely worth reading and worth engaging with, but as I say, we had a more extended conversation as well. So if you subscribe to the Anfield Wrap, you'll be able to hear that later in the week. Also later in the week, we're going to Glasgow, live show in Glasgow on Saturday, 16th. We get there, doors are 3:30, so it's an afternoon effort. We're on at about 4:30. We'll finish at about 7, so plan your day accordingly, and if you fancy that sort of thing, that's the plan. So get yourself along there. Tickets at theanfieldwrap.com/TAW live. That's coming up. And Mo, you've been doing loads and loads of work on Substack and in a variety of different ways.
Yes, it's been fun. I've actually decided to do a lot more actual proper journalism. Substack writing, so match reports, but sometimes just noticing things about the game and then deciding to write about them. But I've had a bit more access, as probably most people have known, have heard me in press conferences, and I've decided, well, since I'm there and getting access and getting the chance to speak to the manager on a regular basis, I should really start doing something about it. So I've got my YouTube channel where I'll do my review of the press conference, and then I've got Substack where I'll do a little writing.
What should people put into Substack to find yours?
So it's Mo Stewart, but with a 0 instead of an O for the Mo, .substack.com. But if you just go on the Substack page and search Mo Stewart, I should probably come up there. So you'll find me there. All of my stuff, all of my past archived stuff is all there, readily available. I've also got a new podcast of my own that is coming later on this year, so you might want to get in ahead and get subscribed to that now so you can find out all about it.
Excellent stuff. There you are. That's where we're up to. I want to talk about Nunez and I want to talk about Salah and Ryan. I almost want to talk about the two of them together because they obviously each scored a goal. Salah contributes to Nunez's moment, albeit by virtue of being absolutely wiped out, only for the referee to go, no, that's fine, in ways which I'm just still gobsmacked about. But the danger of the two of them and the fact that the two of them do have such a good relationship, I think, is no bad thing. And as I say, they just both contribute to the match-winning moments, and Salah's ability to be around for big moments just remains. He's number one in the Premier League where that stuff's concerned.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the relationship those two have got, I think they definitely enjoy playing with each other. I think that's pretty crystal clear. Salah, I thought he was really good first half, and I think, weirdly he gets the goal second half, but I thought actually second half he was maybe struggling a little bit. There was one or two loose passes. He wasn't the only one, by the way. There was that was going on in the middle of the park a little bit as well, to an extent. But first half, I thought Lucas Digne really struggled with him. The thing about Salah, given his height, he's so strong, and he can outmuscle the very best of them, and he never ever gets the amount of fouls he should. People are allowed seemingly to manhandle him and do what they want to him, whichever football match, whether it be kind of on the continent or kind of Premier League game. People get to basically do whatever they want to him, but he overcomes lots of that. And again, he's turning the performance there. That was again probably 7-8 out of 10. You'd have to say. I think the goal's brilliant. Because I wasn't quite sure whether Martinez was going to kind of just step back and then rush him. But Salah's he's got kind of the whole thing in the palm of his hand, and it's a great finish. Almost kind of sits him down and dinks it over him. The celebration's fantastic. But
I like that Martinez manages to do that trick when he makes the goal bigger.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, which is a bit mad. And I'd kind of said, I had a chat to Andy before the game. I don't think he's quite as one or two people are down on Martinez in terms of his ability. I think he's a good goalkeeper. Is he as good as our number one? Absolutely not. And he's not the best in the world, not by a long shot. But I think he is a very, very good Premier League goalkeeper. But Salah makes a bit of a mug of him there. But I think his overall game, Salah, I'm sitting in the cop, and I think one of the things that struck me when it was 1-0 was the fact that, and this is where maybe people have got to get used to the change in style a little bit. You could see that countless times we were kind of refusing the pass and choosing not to make it. It's this whole risk-reward thing, and I think, one or two maybe are struggling with that, where Liverpool aren't going to be gung-ho and go searching for the second, and that does bring a little bit of peril, because if you are 1-0 up, you could lose a goal and it becomes 1-1, so there is a little bit of risk to it. But I just don't think this manager's prepared to kind of go chasing goals needlessly. He's very, very comfortable with the kind of shape and the setup we've got. He backs it. He backs the lads on the pitch. And I think, the players have taken on board the instruction ever so well. And that was really apparent to me, that Liverpool weren't going to go looking for that second unless an opportunity presented itself, and it does. It's a bit of a mistake. Salah seizes on it. Maybe he has lost a yard or two, but he gets there and tucks it away nicely. And in terms of Nunez, I thought, it was a good performance. Gets his goal, made up for him that he gets his goal. He probably should have at least another one. I think the header, listen, sometimes they can go in. You wouldn't say it was gilt edge, but maybe he should hit the target. But that one where he puts it over the bar, I think he'll look back on that and think, just needed to stay a little bit calmer. And they're the moments that frustrated a little bit, but take nothing away from his goal. It was a brilliant finish.
It's a brilliant finish for the goal. It really is. He does really well. And it's odd, isn't it? Because he's calm for that, so you think he'd be more calm for the second one. And I think there's a little thing actually around, I think what Haaland does to get his goal at the weekend, where his body is not where it needs to be and he manages to effectively twist himself to make sure he's there for the rebound. I think there's a little thing where Nunez is going full pelt in a straight line, and I think he decides the only thing he can do is what he does. I'd argue he could maybe be better off just going low and accepting it's a bit likely the keeper saves it, but therefore it's likelier it goes in. But I'm not a brilliant footballer, and he is. But I think there's a little thing where I feel a little bit like, when you want to talk about calmness, there was actually an argument to say, lad, it's all right if you take one more touch and ease up a little bit here and do what Salah does. But it's interesting because Salah fluffs the one before when he's on the break and he tries to feed it through to Diaz. And this is why I think these moments, I think it's quite telling. Salah that time doesn't quite do the right thing because he could have gone on then. And I think he thinks about that and works that out. I think with Nunez, I think that's a good video for them to work on that, ironically, because I think he'll get in like that a fair bit. And I think that the coaching staff may well say, you can just take a beat and just to take the edge off this and just make it easier for yourself. I think that's where I'm not so much frustrated with the finish as I am. He could just have had that little pause to see what he could do. Yeah, possibly. And again, we kind of make the point before about goalkeepers. Centre forwards do miss one-on-ones. Salah has missed one-on-ones. He has done. But I think what does Nunez a little bit, you talked about Haaland off air, that he'll miss chances, and he will. But he's got such a back catalogue now of scoring goals that you almost put it down to, well, it's one of them. Even if it's not, even if it happens slightly more than you think it does, you can kind of put that in a bit of a box. But with Nunez, because the goals aren't as free-flowing and there's a number of those finishes where it just looks a little bit rushed or not quite as calm and composed as you want, that's where people will kind of jump on something, and maybe it's a little bit harsh sometimes, but guess what, if you're leading the line for Liverpool and you cost that amount of money, people are going to say, well, lad, it's only this amount of goals, or you've missed that comes with the territory, that comes with the ticket. So it is one of those things. I hope it works for them, but you are in season 3 now, so you maybe do want to see a little bit more, if we're being fair about it. But I thought overall he can be pleased with his performance against Villa.
I agree. I think it's a strange one because the comparison with Haaland is always going to be there. It's never going to let him go. The fact that they arrived at the same time. So I think they've played a similar amount of games. I think Haaland's on like 77, Nunez on 73. Haaland's got 75 goals and Nunez has got like 24, I believe. So obviously it's like a third of his. But then you have to factor in the fact is that Haaland's not playing with Mo Salah. So Haaland is the one who is expected to get all the goals, whereas Nunez is not. But I do think it's a real shame because when he misses chances like that first one, where he's had so much time to think about it, it undoes so much of the other good work he does. So the header that he misses, the one where he heads it just wide, like the movement to get into that position was fantastic. And I'm not a striker. I'm not someone who's played football, but Alan Shearer is a very good striker. And every time I listen to Alan Shearer talk about Darwin Nunez, it gives me hope. Because Alan Shearer believes that he can fix it. Because he can see all of the good parts of what he's doing. Yeah. And he's not fixating on the one little bits that he's not doing. But yeah, the fact that the idea of him being able to slow down, I think that comes with a calmness and a confidence of being like, okay, I trust myself in this situation. I know that I'm not going to have to run as fast as I can because I know I've already looked and there's no one who's going to catch me, so I can just calm myself, concentrate. It goes back to what Daniel Sturridge said about having certain finishes for certain situations and knowing when you're in this situation you're going to do this, or if the situation demands maybe you do this, so you have one or two. I don't think he's got that yet. I still think that he's trying to work it out in the moment, and that's sometimes where he's rushing. But the fact is that, like we said, Salah loves playing with him because he is able to make Salah's job easier by not just like occupying space, but also by being a threat when he has the ball. And they're looking for each other all the time. Like, again, we talk about Salah. Salah's been a ridiculously great player for a long, long time now. But this is the first time I felt like he's enjoying passing. like, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but he's enjoying it. Like, you can tell in every game, there's a couple of moments where you're thinking, old Salah's shooting there, and he's not. He's trying to pass it, and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes he'd be better off shooting, but he doesn't mind. He doesn't care. He gets to the end of the game, and Nunez has had 6 shots, and he's had 2. He doesn't care.
Well, on that, John, the thing from the Nunez point of view, prior to this game, he's just not had that many shots, not being that involved, that near to goal, especially in league games. And there was a little thing the manager said before the last game, before the international break, when he was asked about Nunez as a centre forward, but he also said, well, we've not been given enough chances to Jota. Yes. Jota then had 3 really good chances against Palace, and it's worth pointing out, Jota has 3 really good chances against Palace and scores 1. Nunez, this last game of this international break, 3 really good chances against Villa, scores 1. And within the context of that, I think the thing that most pleased the manager actually is he was in the right place on all 3 of those occasions.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think there have been a few performances in a row by Nunez where I think it's fair to say, he's done well, he's contributed, but you were a little bit worried about the fact that the chances weren't coming for him, where it was that was like the least of your worries. So last season, really, he felt like a chance magnet. It was just whether he was putting enough away and whether he was contributing enough, in other ways, really. Whereas, this season under this manager, I think his general play, has been good, but the chances feel like they've sort of disappeared out of it, and it's getting that balance, isn't it? And it's where you want your forward to be and what you want them to be doing, and It can be hard sometimes for sort of any player, especially for him, where his confidence has been up and down. I think it is fair to say at Liverpool, and he's got a new manager coming in, he doesn't pick him straight away, which maybe sort of says something, and so they're all trying to work him out. Really, I think the manager just sees him as a really good option, and I think, again, it's going back to the point of him. I think he just likes his options throughout the squad, and I think it's the case for the forwards as well. And I think for the manager, it's almost like, well, I've got a clean slate. I don't care how much he cost. Do you know what I mean? Or I don't care what baggage it is, or whether what other people are saying about I think I've got 6 forwards. When they're all fit, obviously it's down to 4 at the moment, and I'll use you, and I'll expect good performances from you. And I think the manager's probably quite happy with him, what he's showing, and if we wanted him to add a goal or 2 to the good all-round performances, well, like you say, Neil, he does that at the weekend. Yeah, he misses one as well. I think the frustration comes from a lot of things, but I think, from Saturday's point of view, I think when you see a player do the wrong thing and it doesn't work, you get more frustrated than when when you feel like he's done the right thing but it hasn't sort of quite worked. Really, there's acceptable ways to lose, there's acceptable ways to miss chances, and there's always those things as football fans, really. So quite often, we'll go through and he'll do something, that's a bit mad and it won't work. And, even sometimes you do something mad and it works, and you still think, why has he done that? I still go back to that chip against Brentford, and I don't know why he did it. It goes in, but like, fucking hell, that's like the 8th best option. And he scores, and so great. But obviously, you know, and listen, and that one goes in the top corner at the weekend, and everyone's saying it's a brilliant, but he doesn't need to hit it. He's making it harder for himself, and then you're more likely for it to sort of to not go.
If he wasn't great on his left foot as well, you can just stride another yard and you just go again and go across the body. He's got a really good left foot.
And you talk as well about pause and what that does for you, but also sometimes the keeper makes your mind up for you when you do that, because he's not expecting you to do it, and that's what happens with the Salah goal. Do you know what I mean? He just sort of pauses and waits, and then Martinez, you know, just sort of shows him all that goal, and he goes, oh fine, I'll just kick it there. I don't think that's the plan when Mo Salah's going into the box. I don't think he's got one necessarily. He's just got different finishes for different moments, and what we talked about before, and he's able to assess situations, and he's able to slow down. Listen, Mo Salah's older, he's more experienced, he's probably got a higher level anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think Nunez is going to get to Mo Salah, who's talked about as one of the best players in the world. But I think, you know, I think you do sort of pick up certain things, but I think, you know, buying himself a little moment in these situations and just going, well, I'm going to have a think about what I'm going to do. But also, sometimes goalkeepers make up, because they're not expecting it to stop. Or not quite stop, but like, to have that sort of pause. You know, how many goals that you talked about, the original Ronaldo, how many goals did he have like that, where he just went, what are you going to do? And then he just walked past you. And then the fella would just fall on his back and look like a fool. Do you know what I mean? It's hard, you know what I mean? Comparing him now to the best players in the world, and, you know, some of the best players sort of, you know, the last 40, 50 years. But I think if he could just do a little bit more of that, then I think. But I'm quite happy with him. I think the manager's quite happy with him at the moment, and he's contributing to Liverpool winning games of football.
He is indeed. Liverpool winning games of football is why they are where they are. Liverpool top of the pile, played 11, won 9, drawn 1, lost 1. Ian Ryan. It's a 5-point gap now back to Manchester City. The first thing to point out is that you're still at the point where everyone hasn't played everyone yet, and secondly, it is perfectly reasonable to say, not to obsess about, but to say that Arsenal have had the hardest run at the start of the campaign. I think you can't get away from that. But we've got the point where everyone's played the flavour of everyone. This idea that Liverpool haven't played anyone yet is being slightly undone by the makeup of the league table. The vast majority of these sides, which, by the way, Liverpool have beaten, the makeup of the league table says that, you know, if you're not careful, you're going to say that there's only 2 teams that matter, which for everyone, which is Arsenal or Man City. If you're Liverpool, if you're Arsenal, it's Liverpool and Man City. Like, that's the madness you're going to end up getting into if you're not careful. Everyone's played the flavour of everyone, but where we've touched lucky so far is that we played 4 sides who were away in the bottom half, and the manager would be amongst the first to admit that. So nothing's done, nothing's sorted, nothing's boxed off, but the maths of it all at the minute play nicely for Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right, Neil. I mean, that argument that Liverpool have played no one now, that has now been just kind of, you know, blown to smithereens. You can't have that anymore, I'm afraid, even though rival fans will still try and push that agenda. Liverpool are playing big sides, good sides, and they're putting them away.
Here and abroad.
Yeah. On the Arsenal point, they've had a tough run, no doubt about it. They find themselves 9 points behind. You know, if we were 9 points behind the team, you'd be thinking, fucking hell, we're going to have to go some now to kind of close that out. It can be done. You know, I think back to 21-22, when Liverpool would go to Chelsea and they draw and they find themselves 11 points behind Manchester City, albeit with a game in hand. But I could not make a case really back then for closing that gap out. And Liverpool nearly do it. They finished on 92 points. So I don't think you can rule anyone out in November, is what I'm saying. But the problem Arsenal got now is there's very little wriggle room. So they've had a tough run. When they come back, all right, they play teams like Nottingham Forest, but we know they're quite good away from home. They can cause you a problem. That's not an ideal fixture on the back of an international break. I know they have a poor result against Newcastle, but all of a sudden, those games can feel much trickier when there's less wriggle room. Yes, they'll probably go to West Ham after that and beat them, but then they play Man United with a new manager. We don't know what that looks like. That could be trickier. And then they go to Fulham, and by the way, Fulham are quite good. So we can all say they're going to go on a run now, and they might do. But those next 4, 2 or 3 of them, you could easily see a scenario where they might just drop points because of the things I've said. And listen,
I think what's hard for them on the wiggle room point, and we've lived this reality, you know, when we've been going up against City, and I think Arsenal still do see City as the main rival, but it's worth saying there's a gap between them and City, so it's not like there isn't a gap there. I think there's just a little thing where, in any case, when you're in this league title, when you feel as though you need to go the other side of 90, you feel like you kick off 1-0 down. But that's intensified. And what it actually means is that when you get to the last 15 of games and it's only 1-0, you're all looking at each other like one thing goes, the tension ratchets up for everyone. And I think that'd be my concern now. Whereas the really weird thing is, we can beat Southampton, and then if City somehow come into Anfield and beat us, we're still 2 points clear. Yeah. That's and you've watched City play football with that buffer. We've seen Liverpool play football with that buffer in 1920. Nothing relaxes you more. The scoreboard pressure of the league table now is against Arsenal, and that's the one thing. I think that they look in good shape. I thought they were good against Chelsea. I thought they probably deserved to win the game on the whole, although Chelsea should have gone ahead. But I just sort of left it feeling like if you're them now, every time you kick off, you're feeling like, God, we needed to go for us today.
Yeah, absolutely. The pressure increases massively, and if you do get one or two more knocks, and I don't just mean physical knocks, but things going against you, that can all play into it. I don't think the manager's particularly helping them, by the way. He's still fucking banging on about having injuries, and they had a full squad yesterday, fully fit squad against Chelsea. So we can't keep pushing that narrative, but I think sometimes if managers start making excuses in public, it gives the players an opportunity to latch onto those excuses. So they've got to be careful on that front. But I think it makes it really, really intriguing after a break. And you've mentioned City there as well. They'll get one or two players back, I'm sure.
They'll just get fitter, I think, because
they will do. But you've always questioned with City, I say question, but because they've won so many on the bounce, because they've gone and done 4 on the bounce, you think to go and do 5, that's never been done, because 4 had never been done. You can't see a scenario where if they just fall a little bit further behind, does it just become too hard and too much? And then at the end of the day, they decide, well, actually, our race is run here, we'll go again next season. Again, that's a scenario that could just play out. So Liverpool got all the cards in a minute, but it's important that they come back after that break and get kind of stuck into Southampton, and then the teams that come after that as well.
One thing I did see, I can't remember who tweeted it. I think it might have been Andrew Beasley, but apologies if it wasn't. But the thing that we're actually game by game, we're on the same number of points as we were last year, and I think that's an interesting one. Now you've obviously got to swap out Ipswich for Sheffield United. I think that's how he did it. But so we gained 2 points at Old Trafford and we gained 1 point at Arsenal, but then you lose the 3 because we beat Forest last season, and so it actually sort of equals out. So I think that's maybe a little bit of a reminder of, okay, well,
done nothing yet.
Done nothing yet, and there's loads to do. And the teams who were beaten, they need some beating, but we beat them last year as well. Now, the other side to that is there's games that we can point to last year, Palace at home being an obvious one where you think, well, we can, there's gains to be had, Everton away, things where you back us to get more points, in this year than we did last year. But I think when I saw that, it was a reminder of, okay, well, the work is, a lot of the work sort of is to become it. If a bigger tests maybe are there, but we're passing our test better, and that's all I can say at the moment.
But the one thing I come back on, John, is I think that the part of that is we actually did pretty well last season.
Yeah,
and I think that this was sort of one of the things that was missed. I think because the way the season sort of fizzles out a little bit. That was, and there was tons and tons of context, as it's worth occasionally sort of listing, but they were banging it until at least the first week of April, if not the second week of April. I think remembering that at this time, I think is no bad thing.
Yeah, no, that is fair. I think we're top. Early April sort of going into it, and then when the wheels go, they sort of really go. It's after the international break in March, isn't it? And that FA Cup game just before the seems to sort of knock them in a really sort of strange way. But I think There are a lot of good performances last season, a lot of good results, and a decent, if not a spectacular, by the end sort of points total, and so a lot of the results will be the same if you're going well again, because you're beating a lot of teams last year and you beat them again this year. But like I say, it is sort of the others really, and what they're doing that makes you think, well, there is a real opportunity for Liverpool, and I think they sense it as well.
Yeah, it's another weekend. I think they very much do sense it. Mo, maybe round off on that, but it's another weekend where both rivals drop points. To get to 90 now, Liverpool would need to go at 2.2 a game on the remaining. City 2.4. To be fair, the trajectory they're on is 87 and a half. City 87 or 88, and that's. Whilst we were looking at them and seeing the performances and seeing that they've lost 4 on the bounce, well, 2 of those aren't in the league. No. And there is, if this is the wobble, the damage hasn't been that bad. Arsenal would now need to go at 2.55 to get to 90. They'd need to basically go at the rate of a 96-point season now to get to 90, if you see what I mean, on 38 games. Now, my thing on Arsenal, and I take Ian's point and I made my own, but we've had 2 consecutive seasons where Arsenal have put a big run together. So I think that you've got to show them the requisite respect and presume at some point they will put a big run together.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that Arsenal certainly aren't out of it. I think 9 points feels big, but it can be as magic. I mean, we basically gained 6 points to City in 8 days. That's 2/3 of 9 points. So it can still change very quickly. And I'm like you, I think that Arsenal was it last season or the season before where they went off to Dubai and they had a little bit of a reset after. I think it was last season.
Yeah, it was last season.
Because they lost to Fulham and West Ham, was it?
Yeah.
And then they had a bit of a reset and they came back stronger and they were able to kind of refocus. I think they have the ability to do that again. I don't think it's the team are falling apart or anything like that. With City, I think that something that we need to remember is the fact that they've been further away from the top than this in all 4 of those seasons. They've just won the league and come back. So they've been 6 points down, they've been 8 points down, and they've come back. So they're not dead either. However, to John's point in terms of the comparison between this season and last season, what we didn't do last season was beat City at home. And I think that where we are now, it's a strange situation because we've been happily watching ourselves do very, very well. And now suddenly everybody else is talking about Liverpool. All of these, we thought that they'd be rubbish, but now they're not. All of that noise is starting to come. So you wonder how much pressure that adds to this group. Because every single game now is going to be feeling like, it's theirs. I've already seen people say it's theirs to lose. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. But if we beat Manchester City, if we put an extra 3 points between us and them at that stage, that's when it can really change.
Just last words on it, Ian, is the manager in his pre-match press conference, I think, has been really interesting when this has been put to him. You're top of the league, there's this. He says we expect to be top of the league. He gets pushed again. He says the players have done this before. I think within Liverpool, to John's point about how much they're enjoying it in general, enjoying the football, but also I think enjoying the challenge. To me, and it is led by Van Dijk. I thought Van Dijk's entire demeanour post-match there against Villa was quite interesting. Closing the game out, striding around the pitch, striding around it like he owns the place. It's small body language points, but first and foremost, I think they'll want the pressure. And I think the manager wants the pressure, and the manager's come in to win. I think he's told them all they can win. I think he's told them all what they need to do to win. I think that this points comparison thing that John's talking about, I reckon it's on a big fucking board somewhere. They're seeing it every single day, and he's saying, you've done nothing yet, boys, because there's all this to do. I think that he just keeps putting gauntlets down to them, and I think the nature of their personality is they're going, yep, great, come on, let's go. Yeah,
I totally agree. I think the demeanour of the manager is one of the things that's impressed me kind of the most. I think the way he is all business, and I love some of his pre and post match stuff. He's so honest, and that can upset 1 or 2 people. And listen, while it's all going well, I'm sure the players would all kind of take it in the spirit it's meant. But I think they will buy into a lot of this. It's important to remember that there are players there who are now over 30. We all know because there's contract negotiations going on with some of them, and they know that there's not an endless amount of time here where they get to go and win the biggest honours. But there's a chance now, and maybe 1 or 2 might have been going into the season thinking, not sure whether we can do it in year 1 of Slot, because new manager, new ideas, all that. But when you find yourself at the top of the summit, when you find yourself there, my God, you've got to take advantage of it. And Liverpool have an opportunity now. And Mo's point there about beating City, all of a sudden, if that does come to pass, if that does happen, then you can imagine a scenario where for City it just feels incredibly difficult to then catch Liverpool. Notwithstanding as well the confidence boost you get from a result like that, you hope that would then catapult Liverpool into kind of going on and doing even greater things. But there are tests to come. I mentioned before after the international break, Southampton, you'd imagine we'd have enough to kind of take care of business there. But there's some tough away games after that where Liverpool will absolutely have to be on it. But it's looking pretty good at the minute. Absolutely, indeed. Other side of this international break, must-win games all over the place. He's mentioned Southampton, he's mentioned City, but there's the last ever derby at Goodison. Thank you very much indeed to John Gibbons, Mo Stewart, Ian Ryan, Jordan Singleton doing the images, Andy Heaton doing the audio, and pulling it all together for us all the way through. Miguel Delaney as well. Thank you very much indeed to Peloton, the official digital fitness partner of Liverpool Football Club, for backing the Anfield Wrap through this little run indeed, because the Anfield Wrap's back in Liverpool. They're top. The 5 points clear. You fancy it, don't you?